Hello and welcome to coverage of the quarterfinals here at Grand Prix Milwaukee. Maria Bartholdi and Reed Duke in the booth with you here this round. We're going to start things off with Isaac Croute versus Owen Turtenwald. Isaac, being the top seed, gets to be on the play here. This is not the correct deck names for either player. Just going to point that out right now. It's obviously not Mono Red Aggro or Golgari Midrange.
Yeah, this is going to be Jeskai control against Blue-Red Drakes. So Isaac Croute was our top seed. He really ran the tables with his Jeskai deck. Isaac Croute also, I remember him from about a month ago, the top 8 of Limited Grand Prix Montreal, which we covered together, Marina.
Oh, yes.
But Isaac Croute, he ended up going out in the semifinals, but I remember watching this guy and saying, we haven't seen the end of him. He's a young kid, super sharp player, and now showing that he has chops in Constructed in addition to Limited.
This top 8 gets him to bronze, so he's pretty excited to have 2 buys at future Grand Prix, he says. All right, we've got our deck archetypes updated for you there, and sure enough, yeah, Jeskai control versus Is It Drakes. What do you think just basically of this matchup, Reed?
I think Owen's Is It Drakes deck should be a little bit ahead. The Is It player has won most of the time that we've seen this matchup on camera over the course of the weekend. And Owen in particular, I think he has a nice sideboard plan for the matchup and has shown his ability to navigate challenging situations very well. I would not be surprised if either player won the first game, but I do give the modest advantage to Owen in the post-sideboard games once he gets additional tools like Ral Is It Viceroy, Niv Mizzet Parun, and some well-placed counterspells.
Both of these players spending the early turns of the game getting their hands ready to go. Lots of cantrips and draw spells. And here's the first big play of the game. That's Crackling Drake, but it's going to be met with a Syncopate from Isaac Croute.
Croute with a nice window to resolve Teferi, and Teferi just so powerful, being able to untap the lands and have the control player prepared with either a counterspell or a removal spell. Owen needs a big turn here. Returning his Arclight Phoenix would be a great start, but even then it's very likely that Isaac Croute is going to be able to untap with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, which, as we've seen for nearly a year in Standard, that's often the death knell for the opponent.
Owen's got 1 spell this turn so far. It's an opt. Like you said, there is an Arclight Phoenix in his graveyard already. Tormenting Voice here is going to discard that Lava Coil. See if we can get that bird back. And then first we're going to play a land. Take a couple of damage here for Owen. There's a shock on Teferi, down to 3.
That's a nice one. That actually gives Owen a chance of removing the Teferi, but Justice Strike is going to re-kill that Phoenix.
Phoenix gone, but probably not forever. Back into the graveyard there. Teferi will tick back up to 4 for Isaac. Yep. And a Crackling Drake of his own is good and draws an Mizzet.
And crucially, Owen had discarded a Lava Coil to Tormenting Voice last turn. We'll see if he's still prepared to answer that Crackling Drake.
Shock is a draw here for Turtenwald. Mirari Conjecture in hand as well. Chart a Course is going to start things off for Turtenwald, who made it into the top 8 at 8th place.
Owen and his opponent were not sure whether or not they could safely draw into the top 8 in the last round. So, well, actually, I'll correct that. Owen wanted to draw. The opponent was not sure. So the end result was that they played game 1. Owen won. He offered 1 more time, would you like to draw with me? And the opponent said, yeah, okay, now that I'm down a game, I think that's the best move. But they both made it. That was Owen Turtenwald and Jacob Tilk.
Oh, that's great. All right, so continuing to draw cards, sculpt the hand for Turtenwald here. The Drake is able to come, the Phoenix is able to come back this turn from the graveyard. Chemist's Insight here for Croute.
Jeskai deck really just hitting its stride here. Shields are up, Planeswalker ticking up, Chemist's Insight refilling the hand. So this is just sort of the dream scenario for any Jeskai control player.
And here is Niv Mizzet for Isaac Croute. And this card can be a huge problem. We've seen it do some absolutely fantastic things this weekend. Advantage bar scoots over in Isaac Croute's favor. drawing cards, pinging things, killing creatures. And lands now on tap with Teferi. There's a look at the Dragon Wizard himself. Goblin Electromancer a little later into the game for Owen Turtenwald here, but we're able to jumpstart a radical idea. But this is very painful for Owen because of the Niv Mizzet.
Yeah, I mean, when you begin your turn, you're way behind, and your best play is to have each player draw one card. You know you have a long climb to get back to even.
Your mod seedings are posted by the black gathering point on pink paper. Please find your pods.
Chart a course here. Ping, draw. And down goes the Goblin Electromancer. Couple of cards, new cards for Owen to play with here. And here's a Discovery.
So with no answer to the Niv Mizzet in sight, I have to say that this is just about it. I don't know whether Owen will officially survive the next turn, but there's no way that he's going to overcome the advantage that Isaac Kroot has amassed at this point.
What's a way that Owen has to deal with Niv Mizzet?
They're few and far between, to be honest with you, especially in the main deck, but Entrancing Melody or Beacon Bolt or double burning it would be the best options.
So we've gotten 2 birds back now for Turtenwald, but they don't look long for this world with that Niv Mizzet on the table. One gets shot down here after an opt, and here's another opt. Oof, brutal. Birds down. And back over to Croute. Now he can start pinging Owen's face with Niv Mizzet off of his draw step, and he can attack.
Yep, you see him counting up damage there. I think this is going to be the last turn of the game.
Teferi draws a card. There's another ping, and Owen Turtenwald has seen enough and scoops him up. That is game number 1 going to Isaac Kroot. Jeskai control list over Is It Drakes. Heading into sideboarding here, you mentioned how Owen has more tools at the ready to be able to deal with what Kroot is going to bring.
Yeah, so just going one by one through Owen's sideboard, he has Banefire, which is nice, an uncounterable burn spell for a slow matchup, can take out a Planeswalker. Beacon Bolt, additional answer to Crackling Drake or Niv Mizzet if you would like. Lava Coil similarly answers the Drakes, but is kind of poor outside of that. Murmuring Mystic, an option if he wants to develop his board presence to fight those Planeswalkers. Negate, 2 copies, definitely coming in. Niv Mizzet Perun, 2 copies, definitely coming in. Ral, Is It Viceroy, definitely coming in. That's a great one in particular since it can kill the opposing creatures or simply generate an advantage if he can stick it at the right time. Other than that, he's just looking to take out some of his weaker burn spells.
And this is the kind of deck that has the ability to be very, very flexible and get in underneath Jeskai control before they are able to wrench full control of the game.
That's what's really going to make it tough on Isaac Kroot after sideboarding, is that Owen can play such a wide variety of different games. He has the Broken Arclight Phoenix draws available to him, so Isaac Kroot wants to protect himself with that, with plenty of spells that exile opposing creatures. But Owen can also just play a control game where he's going to make land drops, sculpt his hand, and then try to win with something like Ral or Niv Mizzet.
Let's take a look at Isaac Kroot's deck list. Now, what is he interested from his sideboard in?
I have to say that the sideboarding is a lot more nebulous and challenging from Isaac Kroot's side because Owen's deck is more multidimensional. When you play against control, it's pretty clear all my cards that come in for slow matchups are coming in. All my cards that are great against control are coming in. But Isaac has to be prepared for these wide variety of game plans. So it's unclear to me whether he wants Legion Warboss, which is a card that can punish Owen's slower draws but is going to be very poor against his faster draws. I think cards that can play multiple roles like Ixalan's Binding, Lyra Dawnbringer, Negate, those are the cards that are more likely to come in, and other than that he's going to have to make some tough choices in regards to which reactive answer cards he's going to have access to.
Isaac Kroot is a student. Previous Magic accomplishments, as you mentioned, was Grand Prix Montreal this year, top 8 there. Brought Jeskai Control this weekend because he says it seems to have good matchups against most other archetypes. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think this is the one that slipped through that is not necessarily a favorable matchup, but Jeskai does just fine against Golgari, does just fine against White Weenie. It does great against the slower mid-range decks like those treasure map red or red-white decks that we saw on day one. So Jeskai, yeah, it seemed to be a popular choice among the top players, and it was relatively successful, putting 2 into our top 8.
I'm going to quiz you now. What do you think Owen Turtenwald said was the best card for him this weekend? We've got player profile lists here where they fill out once they hit the top 8. That's one of the questions.
Was it his Mirari conjecture?
That's right.
Very nice.
It's almost like you know the guy. Yep, definitely the Mirari conjecture. It's definitely been the source of the coolest stuff we've seen from that deck this weekend.
Owen getting scolded on a procedural error there. I think he maybe pile shuffled more than once, which that's something that I would call it a guideline rather than a rule. You're not going to get a penalty if you pile shuffle more than once, but the judges do like you to pile once and then employ different methods of shuffling to make sure your deck is nice and randomized.
No time limit here in the top 8, but you are still expected to maintain a good pace of play. I found something like pile shuffling or pile counting to be useful to make sure that I have correctly sideboarded or de-sideboarded and counting all of my cards, but not an effective shuffle. Players here getting ready for game number 2. Bunch of other matches going on down in our feature match area. Adrian Sullivan versus Adam Hernandez. Brian Lynn versus Seth Manfield. And Jackson Hicks versus Jake Tilk here in our quarterfinals. We've had a pretty great tournament, I would say, Reed. Lots of deck diversity in this standard. I love it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this is a really healthy and balanced standard environment. There's a lot of powerful things out there. You have to be prepared to play against this Jeskai control deck. You have to be prepared for the super fast starts of the red and white decks. You have to be prepared for these enormous flying creatures out of Is It Drake. So there are things that are pulling you in a lot of different directions at once and demanding the right answers. But within that framework, there's a lot you can do, especially if you're willing to say, okay, I'm going to have one bad matchup, make my deck stronger, and make a metagame call. But there's a lot of flexibility in what you can do in standard, what archetype you can bring, and even how you can build that archetype within the same color combination.
Exactly. And one deck is not running away with everything either.
Right, yeah. I mean, this week it's Golgari with 4 in the top 8. Last week it was white aggressive decks. And before that, you know, it may have been Is It Drakes. All these decks have their time in the sun. And even the results of one weekend don't make me feel like, okay, the sky is falling, there's only one good deck. I'm still willing to bring, you know, pretty much any deck that I might like or have experience with.
Owen Turtenwald taking a mulligan here down to 6 cards. One thing we've noted previously this weekend is that the Is It Drakes deck does have some help on mulligans because of all the cheap cantrip effects that it packs.
Yeah, the Is It Drakes deck, you feel very confident in your ability to get a functional hand because of all the card drawing. You know that if you need lands, you can look for lands. If you need action, you can look for action. So you're going to do well. However, this is a matchup, particularly post-sideboard, where the raw number of resources does matter. You know, the players want to be making their land drops all the way into turn 5, 6, 7. So being down a card, it's not trivial, but it's also not an emergency.
Isaac Croute has kept his 7. So Owen here, we'll see if he's happier with the 6 cards that he draws. Croute going to take a shuffle of the deck here before we head into game number 2. Isaac Croute currently up a game over Owen Turtenwald here in the quarterfinals. Jeskai Control taking down that first game over Is It Drakes. And Niv Mizzet was what really sealed the deal there for Croute. Do you know what number top 8 this is for Owen, Reed?
Believe we looked it up, and it was 25.
5? Wow. Really impressive. Owen Turtenwald here drawing opening 6. And he's going to keep it. There's the scry. It stays on top.
Owen Turtenwald and his sort of lifelong rival, Seth Manfield, both appearing in the top 8 here. Two of the titans of American Magic.
Really cool.
Both with 5 previous Grand Prix wins, so one
right
of them
there, battling.
perhaps able to break the holding pattern if they can make it to the trophy today.
And we are underway here in game number 2 between Isaac Croute and Owen Turtenwald. Owen is just going to say go here, and there's going to be an opt end of turn from Isaac.
So as we expected for the post-board games, things slowing down a bit, both players just sculpting their hands, making their land drops. Wow, Owen left in Entrancing Melody. Not something I would guess would be strong in the matchup between the low number of creatures in the Jeskai deck and the ability for Teferi to retuck something that's been stolen.
Sure.
But I think Owen just really looking for all the ways that he can to navigate long game situations, be prepared with answers for Crackling Drakes and Niv Mizzet, perhaps Lyra Dawnbringer.
Sinister Sabotage there on the Crackling Drake from Owen Turtenwald. We've talked about this a little bit too, the decision to play Sabotage over something like Ionize.
So that's a crucial pattern that I think we saw as a result of Owen being on the play. He's a little more comfortable tapping 4 mana at sorcery speed when Isaac Croute has only 3 lands, whereas if we see a game 3 where Owen might be on the draw, tapping out for Crackling Drake is a pretty nasty prospect if the opponent can counter it and then resolve Teferi.
Opt here for Turtenwald, and a Radical Idea once again. Discovery Dispersal was the draw this turn, and that's how we're going to start things off. Never seen the second half of this cast so far today.
No, although there
weird.
is a niche case where Dispersal is really, really nice and standard. That's against the Lich's Mastery deck. It is an auto win there.
Oh, that'd be sweet.
When Lich's Mastery leaves the battlefield, you die.
Yeah, that's
so
it.
GG. If you get Dispersaled, you're done for.
You know, we haven't seen any of the Dimir Control. I think maybe we saw one game yesterday.
Yeah, Dimir Control, some of my teammates played at the Pro Tour. It's a good deck. It's got some nice things going for it, but it's not a great choice in a field where red and white aggro are very dominant. In particular, has a really hard time against Experimental Frenzy.
Oh, yeah. Chemister's Insight here on the jump start from Isaac Croute. Up to 6 mana on his side of the table here. Owen as well, 2 available right now.
So Croute comfortably ahead on number of cards in hand, but still neither player with a board advantage.
And we're going to try and go for something here. Isaac Croute casting Crackling Drake. Draws a card. Here's an opt from Owen.
So this is an important window for Owen to go for something here. If he can have something like 7th land Mirari Conjecture and negate, or 7th land Ral plus negate, he's going to be in a good position. But if he has to pass this turn without accomplishing much, it'll be a hard game for him to win.
A Crackling Drake here for Owen Turtenwald as well. It is good. Draws and plays his land. End of turn here from Croute is a Justice Strike. And that will take down the Drake.
We see Owen holding Banefire, which is a nice one. It can either kill the Crackling Drake, it can take out a Planeswalker, or if he's patient enough, he can wait and try to sculpt a plan for attacking Croute's life total.
Opt here for Croute. Pushes the card, draws. Drake coming in. Owen takes the damage here. Down to 12. Goblin Electromancer was the draw here for Owen. see if he can put something together, but lots of mana available for Isaac Croute, and he's got the big Drake on the table.
That's right, Maria. Isaac Croute with a pretty comfortable position here. He's got the only creature on the battlefield. He's got all his mana available to him, and he has more cards in hand than Owen Turtenwald. So Owen really looking to double spell on this turn, and even that is a tall order if Croute is holding permission spells.
Goblin Electromancer is good, and now we get a discounted Banefire.
So note he's only casting this for X = 4, which means it is counterable. That's a curious decision for Owen.
There's Sinister Sabotage. Scry's going to leave the Lyra on top.
Oh, 5 or more, yeah. Sorry. Your turn.
And then a pass back. So Crackling Drake survives the Banefire into Smash Face again here, coming in for a huge hit. Owen down to 5, and there is Lyra from Croute.
All right, well, Owen does have this entrancing melody that he's been holding on to for a long time. If he can actually steal one of these creatures, it's still anybody's game. But Owen really needs to make something happen this turn.
Critical moment here for Turtenwald. It's going to take a moment to think about his decisions here. That Banefire not taking down the Drake hurt for sure. And if you see 3 untapped mana from a Jeskai control player, it's also pretty scary. 2 Sabotages already in the bin for Isaac Croute. Here we look to be making a decision about what to do on this critical turn. Murmuring Mystic for Turtenwald. Yeah, confirmed by our spotter down on the floor. He was just made a mistake about that Banefire. Thought it forgot about having to be 5 or greater. Here's a negate on the Sabotage. That was targeting the Murmuring Mystic.
I still like Isaac Croute's decision to counter the Murmuring Mystic, or try to counter it. That's because if you're going to fight a counterspell battle, you really, really want to do it before the Mystic is in play. For example, if he let the Mystic come down and then tried to counter this Blink of an Eye, the result would be the same, except that Owen would be generating tokens when he casts his negate.
Blink of an Eye there, sending Lyra back to hand, netting a bird token for the Murmuring Mystic. Goblin Electromancer in for 2, Croute to 18, Turtenwald on 5.
Masters 25 seals, your bearings have been posted.
There's a look at Isaac Croute. Seal away here for the Electromancer.
Really nice play from Croute because he doesn't know what's in Owen's hand, and if he eliminates the Goblin Electromancer now, this turns off Owen's ability to cast Negate or Disdainful Stroke.
One mana open, but the Electromancer still in play until now. No response from Turtenwald. Seal away, exiles the Goblin. 6 mana still open here for Isaac Croute. Make that 7. And it's going to be a Teferi.
And this is presenting lethal here if he decides to tuck the bird token. He's going to consider deeply because something like a shock could change the equation, but he can go for the kill with the Crackling Drake if he removes the only flying blocker, and Owen does not have a 1 mana instant.
So Croute's going to take a look through Owen's graveyard here. Remember, this is the top 8, so players do have access to deck lists in between games. Croute on a bit of a tear, top 8ing here and Montreal a little bit earlier this year.
He seems to be playing well, and he seems unstoppable.
All right, sure enough, and there is the bird going away, and Isaac Croute taking down this match of our quarterfinals over Owen Turtenwald. He will advance to the semis with his Jeskai control list. Congratulations to him. Congrats to Owen Turtenwald on making his 25th Grand Prix top 8. It's absolutely wild. An incredible accomplishment there.
So assuming that the two Jeskai players in our top 8, Isaac Croute and Adrian Sullivan, if they like their Golgari matchup, then they may have just eliminated the only real, unfavorable matchup in the one Is-It's Drake's player. Now, I will say, whether or not you like the Golgari matchup, it's definitely a competitive matchup where either player could win or lose.
Sure.
But if these players have made it past Golgari players in the Swiss, then they got to be pretty pleased with the way the bracket has broken.
Let's check in on this match in our quarterfinals. Brian Lynn versus Seth Manfield. Brian's on Golgari mid-range, and so is Seth.
So we tune into Seth Manfield peeling 5 cards off of Midnight Reaper when the board is wiped.
That's awesome. Carnage Tyrant with a couple of counters on it here. Vivian Reed in play, and a Carnage Tyrant on Seth Manfield's side of the battlefield as well.
Yeah, so we tune in to a game where Seth Manfield has had a large advantage for most of the game. Brian Lynn making a big play to try to claw back into the game. But Seth Manfield, having drawn so many cards, you better believe he's going to refuel well on this turn where he begins with 10 mana.
Okay, back over to Seth Manfield here. Attack with Carney T takes down Vivian Reed last turn from Brian Lynn. Let's see what he kicks things off with here. Another Vivian Reed. And we're going to immediately plus take a look at the top 4 and see what we like here. How about a land?
Your parents for round 2 have been posted. 5 p.m. modern players. Your parents for round 2 have
Seth Manfield currently ranked #1 in the world. Just got inducted to the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour Hall of Fame. Wild Growth Walker here for Manfield. And Branch Walker. So we'll explore, get a counter, gain some life. It's another Vivian Reed.
So Seth going to protect his life total, protect his Planeswalker.
Keeps it on top.
Play out some creatures. We'll see if he decides to attack with Carnage Tyrant. He's in a great position either way. He can either play this slow and focus on card advantage, or he can race and put Brian within 1 attack of lethal.
And he is going to hit the red zone. Carnage Tyrant in with those big beastly beats. Brian Lynn take a big hit of damage down to 7. Half of his life total. Seth Manfield up to 17 thanks to that Wild Growth Walker. We've talked about the Walker being so important in aggressive matchups for Golgari mid-range. Is it really nice to have in these mirrors too, just to keep yourself safe?
Well, yes and no. Wild Growth Walker is a really powerful creature that demands an answer, but the difference between playing against Golgari and playing against a lot of the other decks in the format is that Golgari just has the answers. And in particular, a creature that can never do better than trade 1 for 1 is not great in the face of stuff like Ravenous Chupacabra.
Life total 7 to 17 in favor of Seth Manfield here. This is game 1 of this quarterfinal match in this Golgari mid-range mirror.
And boy, Brian Lynn is really in a tough spot here. He has a lot of pressure on him to attack that Vivian Reed with the Carnage Tyrant, but he also needs to make sure he doesn't just die on the backswing because Seth Manfield is the Carnage Tyrant of his own in addition to some other creatures.
There's a Jade Light Ranger. Llanowar Elves is revealed from the Explorer there. Staying where it is. Back over to Seth Manfield now. Believe Brian has a cast down in hand. Vivian Reed will tick up. How about another Carnage Tyrant? Seems good.
Seems excellent.
That card has been everywhere in the last week.
Yeah, now one thing chatting with Seth about his Golgari deck is a lot of our players this weekend have shifted more towards Doom Whisperer and away from Carnage Tyrant, sometimes having it in the sideboard, sometimes just not having as many copies at all. But Seth said, no thank you. I want to play this deck because I really like Carnage Tyrant. I'm going to stick with 3, and he's even pairing it with those Druid of the Cowls that we mentioned earlier, so potential to accelerate into it as early as turn 4.
It just closes the door on so many things. There's another one. Vivian assembling quite the menagerie. And that is going to be a pass from Seth. Here we're going to see that cast down from Brian Lynn, targeting the Wild Growth Walker. Back over to Brian Lynn as he tries to find some way out of this mess. From Seth Manfield, Jade Light Ranger. Will this help me out? Vraska's Contempt on top.
It's a reasonable card. If he can hold off Seth's Carnage Tyrants with his own 9/8 hexproof and kill the Vivian Reed, then at least there's a chance.
There's Doom Whisperer from Brian Lynn.
I don't like this play. I think he needs that Doom Whisperer to win, and he needs to kill the Vivian before he deploys it. Because, you know, Seth can just kill the Doom Whisperer, and then at face value, there's not really any way for Brian to gain an advantage here.
Yeah, no value even off of the Surveil. Feels bad, man. Chupacabra takes down the Jade Light Ranger.
Looks like Seth is presenting a lethal attack, assuming he has 1 removal spell. Or even without a removal spell, this is a lethal attack. That's it.
Yeah, Brian Lynn scoops him up. That is Seth Manfield taking down game 1 here in our quarterfinals versus Brian Lynn in the Golgari mid-range mirror.
So perhaps I was harsh about that Doom Whisperer play. It looked like it just didn't matter, and Seth was going to win the following turn regardless of what Brian did.
There's a look down at our feature match area. Our players playing in our quarterfinals here at the end of a standard tournament in Milwaukee. Brian Lynn, if you don't know who he is, from Minneapolis, actually, my hometown. Previous Magic accomplishments listed as winning local tournaments. So this top 8 is a big deal for him. Says it's been a goal of his for years, and it means a lot for him to achieve this top 8. Seth Manfield, his answer to what does this top 8 mean to you was, I can still, in fact, win even after being inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it didn't take him long to find that out.
No. I'm sure nobody counted Seth Manfield out. He says he played Golgari this weekend because it has no bad matchups! Exclamation point.
Sounds good to me. Sounds like a good choice.
Let's check in on our other quarterfinal table. Playing some Magic here. Jackson Hicks versus Jacob Tilk. Golgari midrange versus Mono White Aggro. Mono White Aggro, the only white weenie deck that made it into our top 8 after a beating in the Pro Tour this past weekend. 6 of 8 decks being of that sort.
Things looking pretty bad for Jacob Tilk, though. He's down a game against Golgari, and he's doing okay here with 2 copies of History of Benalia, but Jackson Hicks is doing a little bit better than okay, having 2-for-1 his opponent with Ravenous Chupacabra, having Wild Growth Walker holding the ground and threatening to grow larger. And man, if he's attacking with this Chupacabra, that is a good sign for him.
Chupacabra gets in for 2, even taking some pain off this land, and there is Doom Whisperer for Jackson Hicks. History of Benalia, though, one here poised to go off.
Yeah, you know, it's not that bad if Tilk can answer this Doom Whisperer. He has unlocked a really good attack, and I wonder if Jackson Hicks was perhaps too aggressive attacking with the Chupacabra. I mean, you got to figure if the Doom Whisperer survives, you're winning either way. If it dies, your opponent's attacking you for 8. You can't really block with Wild Growth Walker, but you could double block with Chupacabra and Wild Growth Walker. So I would have liked a little bit more of a conservative play here. I don't think Jacob Tilk's life total is the defining resource at this stage.
It looks like he does have a couple of answers in hand, but wow, he is just going all in on this History of Benalia chain here. Maybe we're going to see some Convoke. And in fact, we are. Conclave Tribunal on the Doom Whisperer.
So quite a good turn for Jacob Tilk. If he had had a land, he could have attacked for 8. As it is, he's only attacking for 4. But still, nice way to recoup some board presence.
Back over to Jackson Hicks. We'll see if he has some way to deal with this army of knights that Tilk has assembled. We're going to kick things off with a branch walker here, that Wild Growth Walker, accruing value, non-stop counters and life, and fine finality on the top of the deck.
Yeah, that's a good one. Even if he doesn't have a 6th land, he could just trade off some creatures and rebuy them, one of them being Ravenous Chupacabra. So you got to imagine that staying on top.
Oh, yeah. It's always a little bit of a sink of the heart to see that on the top of the deck of a Golgari mid-range player if you're playing mono white aggro. Kills everything. And that is a pass back to Jacob Tilk here from Jackson Hicks. And History of Benalia, one of them fires off this turn, the other ticks up to Chapter 2. So 4 knights getting a bonus. Attacking as a Vigilant 4/3s, not bad, not bad. Jackson Hicks, also from Minneapolis. 2 Minneapolis players in our top 8 here, which is pretty cool. Plays around our local stores, and a lot of people call him the Kid. Here's a Johnny for Jacob. We're going to plus distribute a couple of +1/+1 counters on these knight creature tokens.
It's an attack for 18.
That's pretty good.
Ooh, huge play from Jackson Hicks, unlocking his Doom Whisperer.
Assassin's Trophy takes care of the Conclave Tribunal. Doom Whisperer back in the game.
So what this means is that Doom Whisperer can eat one of the 5/4 knights and then eat a Johnny next turn by attacking in the air.
And so here we go, Branchwalker in front of one of the knights, Doom Whisperer in front of one of the pumped up ones. We might see another double block here.
And keep in mind, Jackson wants to trade off creatures here because he has Find on top of his library that he can just use to rebuy 2 of them.
All right, so that's 1 knight down. Jackson Hicks takes the hit to 11. More knights falling in battle.
Yeah, that one's dead. You have two knights still.
And after the dust has settled here, Jacob Tilk is left with 2 knights and a Johnny at 5. Doom Whisperer and Chupacabra. On Jackson's side of the table, a Doom Whisperer immediately going after that Johnny, taking it down, thrashing Brontodon the follow-up play here. Pretty good card against mono white aggro, whose removal spells exist in enchantment form.
Yeah, a nice size too. It can block a Danto Vanguard without dying.
Yeah, that's true. On Jacob's turn, A History of Benalia Chapter 3 fires off, pumping up his knights once again, enabling an attack. Brontodon immediately in front of one, cast down, takes out the other. The saddest little venerated Loxodon, that's not too venerated this time around. The only creature left for Jacob, a 4/4.
Jackson Hicks could even attack with both creatures here because both players know about the Find in his hand, so Tilk is going to be a little bit hesitant to put the Chupacabra into the graveyard, but no matter what, it's a good situation for Jackson Hicks. He can just get back 2, middling ground creatures, and that's often going to be enough since he has such a tremendous resource and now life total advantage.
Chupacabra, Doom Whisperer. Head into the red zone for Jackson Hicks. Venerated Loxodon here contemplating a block. Looks like 1 card left in hand for Jacob Tilk. A couple for Jackson Hicks. Jacob just says, I'll take it. Down to 9. And there's Find Finality, and we're going to use the Find half of this card. Get back our Brontodon.
That's smart because essentially the only way for Jacob Tilk to answer the Doom Whisperer is with an enchantment-based removal spell like Conclave Tribunal. So by putting the Brontodon into play, he's saying, you know what? Either find 2 answers or this Doom Whisperer is killing you in 2 turns.
Yep. Brontodon back on the table for Hicks. On Tilk's side of the battlefield, there's Tocatli Honor Guard. But the damage has already been done. Doom Whisperer comes in for another attack. Tilk at 3. There's Wild Growth Walker for Hicks, and a land, and a pass back. Do you have any kind of answer, Jacob Tilk? Shuffling his cards around in his hand. Looks like he's about ready to pass the turn back. And he does. There's the Doom Whisperer attack, and there is the handshake. That is Jackson Hicks earning his spot in the semifinals here at Grand Prix Milwaukee. Congratulations to him. Congrats also to Jacob Tilk from Michigan. He's a Twitch streamer. Streams under the name First FNM. He said this top 8 meant everything to him. He's worked so hard for this. Wants to thank everyone for supporting him.
Yeah, congratulations to him.
Really great achievement and awesome stuff there for Jackson as well. Says this top 8 should put him back to silver and get him back on the PT. His most exciting play he made this weekend, he says, is Vraska's Contempt on a Llanowar Elves on turn 9.
Impressive.
Yes, quite exciting.
So I can tell you that Jackson Hicks can look forward to a Golgari mirror match.
Ooh.
In his semifinals. He'll be facing the winner of Seth Manfield and Brian Lynn.
All right, let's check in on another table here. Adrian Sullivan versus Adam Hernandez. This is Jeskai Control versus Golgari Midrange. And Adrian's deck, a unique take on the Jeskai Control list. Really cool stuff we've seen from it this weekend. And there's a Niv Mizzet in play.
Yeah, this is just great. I mean, tuning in when the Jeskai player already has Niv Mizzet. It's almost like we said, Adrian, you do your thing. You call us when you have Niv Mizzet. We'll tune in for the exciting part.
Yeah, we saw this just provide some really entertaining stuff. Which round was it? Round 13. It was 14. If you didn't get a chance to see it, it was a Jeskai Control mirror, which I know doesn't sound great, but it was. There's Enigma Drake, the card that Sullivan has been kind of championing all weekend as better than Crackling Drake due to its cheap cost and its ability to leave mana open to protect itself. Cards like Dive Down in Sullivan's list. That treasure you see on the battlefield there, and a product of Spell Swindle that we can also see in his yard. And here we go. There's the attack and a handshake coming in just as he seals the deal. Adrian Sullivan is another one of our semi-finalists here at Grand Prix Milwaukee. Congrats to him. Top 8 for him means a long-awaited return to the Pro Tour.
Wow, so flashback to the early days of Guilds of Ravnica Standard. Our bracket is going to be Jeskai mirror match against Golgari mirror match in the semifinals.
All right. So we're going to get to see some mirrors coming up. Cool stuff here in the quarters. Let's peek in here on Brian Lynn versus Seth Manfield. Seth, of course, up a game. We saw him take down one earlier. Ravenous Chupacabra in play, a couple of Llanowar Elves for Brian Lynn.
Oh, you've got 2 Llanowar Elves? How about 2 Druid of the Cowls?
All right, Seth's looking like a genius here now. How about these 1/3s?
I have found that one of the key factors in this Golgari mirror match is which player can get ahead in mana. Llanowar Elves and Druid of the Cowl, I think, both quite strong cards and perhaps the most impactful early plays you can make in the matchup.
Yeah, in fact, Seth Manfield said his best card this weekend was actually mana accelerating cards. There's a Jade Light Ranger for Brian Lynn. finding some lands. And back over to Seth.
It's funny, Maria, we tuned in and it kind of looked like we were at turn 4 or 5 of the matchup. But
You're right.
It seems that a lot has happened. We have life totals of 34-9. We have stacked graveyards.
Seth Manfield up a game over Brian Lynn at this point. There is a Vivian Reed for Manfield.
And I hope for Brian Lynn's sake that he was thoughtful with his use of Vraska's Contempt, because if he fired that off on a Druid of the Cowl and now is naked against this Vivian Reed, he's in big trouble.
Vivian takes up to 6. There's Carnage Tyrant from Lynn.
A good play, but a player with a Planeswalker uncontested for multiple turns, sometimes they can just amass a big enough advantage to fight that Carnage Tyrant fair and square.
Vivian goes up to 7 here. Take a look at the top 4. What does Seth want?
Another very important play pattern that you'll see in this matchup is the combination of Carnage Tyrant plus Find Finality. So you can imagine Seth Manfield with only 9 life. His best plan against Carnage Tyrant might just be to put a number of blockers into play and hope to multi-block to trade with the big dinosaur. But then Find Finality it's very close to lethal immediately.
Seth Manfield tapping 3. Jadelight Ranger. Finds a friend on top of the deck. So just like you said, Seth Manfield putting some more creatures into play, possibly things that can jump in the way of that Carnage Tyrant.
Now, Seth wants his mana. He wants land so he can play out all the cards in his hand, including the ones that he's finding with Vivian Reed. But he also really wants this Jadelight Ranger to be a 4/3 so it can tangle with the Carnage Tyrant. So it'll be interesting to see what Seth decides with this Explorer.
All right, looks like he's saving it twice. So we are going to grow that Jadelight Ranger, Llanowar Elves, and a pass. Seth Manfield, by the way, his life total is 9. As you mentioned, Brian Lynn 34. So Trample is a tiny bit scary.
Uh-oh, here we go.
All right, Find.
Finality, in fact.
Oh, excuse me, Finality.
So, yeah, that's really tough for Seth. It's not lethal right now because, remember, all creatures have -4/-4. So he's getting attacked for 5 down to 4. But now that creature is even bigger than a Carnage Tyrant of Seth's own. And you got to put a lot of power and toughness onto the battlefield to beat a 9/8 trample.
Oh, yeah. Let's plus Vivian Reed, see what we can find here.
So Seth must produce at least 5 toughness. Excuse me, at least 6 toughness worth of creatures if he's going to survive this turn. It's a tall order. The good news for him is that if he can do it and survive a turn, he is likely to stabilize and win, perhaps with Vivian Emblem, but I don't know if he can survive.
Kind of a little cramped on mana, too. It's going to take a forest from Vivian. Llanowar Elves.
That's 1. Seth's dead.
Yeah.
He's probably playing on just in case his opponent attacks his Planeswalker or misassigns trample damage, but no, that's it.
Seth Manfield scoops him on up. Brian Lynn is going to even things up here in our quarterfinal match. 1 game apiece in the Golgari mid-range mirror. Our final players playing down in the feature match area. Semis coming up after this, and as you can see, the players are going to be able to take a look at the deck lists of their opponents, which, you know, it can influence play. Sometimes to a pretty heavy extent.
Yeah, I'll give you one example. Seth Manfield has one copy of the Eldest Reborn in his sideboard, which that play pattern that we talked about that Brian Lynn used, in fact, to win game number 2 is wipe the board, leave myself with one Carnage Tyrant, sometimes a 9/8 Carnage Tyrant as the only creature remaining. But he's got to be careful against a possible Edict effect if Seth brings in that Eldest Reborn.
Can we expect things to change up heavily or minorly here as we head into game number 3?
I would say minorly. The players are going to bring in any of their sort of powerful, expensive cards. For example, Brian Lynn has 3 additional Carnage Tyrants in his sideboard, so that's one main 3 sideboard. He's probably bringing them all in for the matchup. Seth Manfield going to turn to Vraska Relic Seeker and the Eldest Reborn, perhaps a Midnight Reaper, and basically just trimming the cards that can't provide card advantage, stuff like Wild Growth Walker, stuff like Cast Down. So minor changes, just perfecting their exact suite of answers and threats.
Man, if Golgari midrange takes this whole thing down, Carnage Tyrant has just been an absolute all-star this weekend.
Yes, Carnage Tyrant is a unique and a highly powerful card. We can expect, already looking forward to the finals, which will certainly be Jeskai against Golgari based on the bracket. Carnage Tyrant's going to be an important card there.
Oh, yeah. Players shuffling up here for the deciding match, game number 3. Seth Manfield listed his most exciting play of the weekend as exploring into 2 lands with Jadelight Ranger.
Oh, it's the best feeling. Forget all this Niv Mizzet stuff. When you put 2 lands into your hand on turn 3, you know things are going well.
I can just feel the happiness radiating from you. It's great.
Yeah.
How do you like watching these mid-range mirrors for Golgari?
It's interesting. The mid-range mirrors, I sort of have a love-hate relationship because they are challenging. They're very tactical, looking to squeeze every bit of advantage out of your cards, looking to jockey for position, sneak in damage when you can. All these things are really important, but there's also a lot of randomness in terms of who top decks the powerful card at the right time. You often have sort of even board states or top deck battles where it's just whose library delivers better. So, you try your best, but it's not the type of matchup where you can go, I have the perfect plan, I'm going to win every time, because you are a lot of times at the mercy of what comes off the top and how your threats and answers line up. So while Seth Manfield is one of the very, very best players in the world, and while I think he is going to play this game well and be advantaged, I definitely think either player can win, and there's nothing Seth can do to say, I have checkmate,
Right. All right, players drawing opening hands here for game number 3. Brian Lynn, Seth Manfield all tied up here in the quarters. Golgari mid-range mirror, and we are off to the races. It looks like a Llanowar Elf on turn 1 here for Brian Lynn.
A nice start for Brian Lynn, sort of hijacking being on the play by his mana advantage. He is, in fact, on the draw, but he'll be the first one to hit 3 mana, 4 mana.
Branchwalker here for Seth Manfield finds a land.
And there's Seth hijacking being on the draw by putting an extra card into his hand.
All right, Jadelight Ranger, here we go. Land 1, land 2. All right, we are doing it, Reed.
Yes. This is the perfect start, right? Because you have mana advantage. You're going to have 4 mana on turn 3, and you have a full hand. You're hitting your land drops. Everything just going swimmingly for Brian Lynn.
All right, so an excellent start for the player from Minneapolis. Seth here attacking in with the Branchwalker. Jadelight Ranger blocks. And there's Llanowar Elves for Seth Manfield and a Druid of the Cowl.
That's actually kind of telling that Seth, he must have had at least one of those spells in his hand on turn 2, but decided to deploy the Merfolk Branchwalker instead. Why
do you think he did that?
Well, probably because his mana worked out in such a way that he didn't need it for turn 3. It could have been that he drew the Llanowar Elves on turn 2 and the Druid of the Cowl on turn 3. I'm not really sure. But in either case, he decided to go with the Branchwalker. Maybe finding the land was valuable. We'll see what he does this turn. If he hits his land drop or not, that can give us more information about his hand and why he did what he did in terms of sequencing.
Port turn here for Seth. Looks like it's going to be a 3-mana spell, and it is a Jadelight Ranger. Land. Oh, we almost did it. Fine Finality on top. And we're going to leave it there. Counter to Jadelight Ranger. In fact, we are going to move it over to the graveyard, play another land, and say go.
So having not seen Seth's hand, the fact that he is prioritizing these Explore creatures and the fact that he put the Find Finality in his graveyard, it makes me think he's working hard to hit his land drops, maybe working towards something like a Carnage Tyrant or a different Find Finality.
Vraska's Contempt here on the Llanowar Elves. Hashtag respect from Brian Lynn.
Maybe Brian Lynn is drawing the same conclusion that I am, that Seth is really working for his mana. We saw him make a similar play in Game 2 where he Vraska's Contempted a Druid of the Cowl. Very, very respectful of the mana advantage in the matchup.
Yeah, you talked about it. Multiple players have talked about the importance of Llanowar Elves, or in this case, also Druid of the Cowl, in these Golgari decks. In fact, saying they're the most valuable cards in the whole thing. Merfolk Branchwalker here is the reveal off of Jadelight Ranger's first Explore, and there's the Swamp. So Seth very carefully developing his board, hitting his lands. Life totals 22-20 in favor of Brian Lynn, and there is a Swamp, and he says go.
Wow, so Brian hitting 2 lands with the Jadelight Ranger was particularly awesome because he didn't have any in his hand other than that.
Wow. And there is Carnage Tyrant hitting the table for Lynn. A lot of times it can be a race to Carney T.
Brian Lynn has he's set up the combo yet again, Carnage Tyrant plus Finality in his hand. So if Seth can't deploy his own Carnage Tyrant or something pretty special this turn, he's going to be in big trouble.
Midnight Reaper is a play for Seth Manfield.
Uh-oh, so if Brian Lynn pulls the trigger on Finality, Seth will recoup a bit of the card disadvantage. He'll draw 3, but he'll also lose 3 life and be facing down a 9/8 trample creature.
Wow. Here we go. Finality. 2 counters on the Carnage Tyrant. Sweeping up Manfield's board. He's going to take 3, draw 3 from this Midnight Reaper. And also hit from the dinosaur.
That's going to be 5. Remember, has -4/-4 till end of the turn.
So Seth will fall down to 12. Llanowar Elves, a follow-up play from Brian Lynn.
And the Llanowar Elves perfect because even if Seth had that one answer in the Eldest Reborn, now the Llanowar Elves provides a buffer.
What can Seth Manfield do here, Reed, to get back in this game?
Well, what comes to mind is playing his own Carnage Tyrant. Vraska Relic Seeker would also be okay, as she could tick up to 8 while creating a 2/2 blocker. But Seth is way behind here. He needs a good spell this turn and a good spell next turn, and he needs Brian to somehow not force his advantage. Because there's not any one card in Seth's deck that can contend with that.
All right, here's the
Carnage Tyrant.
Here's the Relic Seeker that you mentioned.
So what this means is that Brian Lynn can kill Vraska by attacking it with both creatures. But if he does that, Seth can just say, okay, I'll take down your Llanowar Elves. Wow, he's quickly just attacking with only Carnage Tyrant. which means that Seth can protect the Vraska. Maybe Brian's just saying, I don't care about Vraska, I'm attacking you.
Yeah, sure did. Seth Manfield down to 3 and a backup Carnage Tyrant to boot for Brian Lynn. Vraska lives, but a lot of trouble on the other side of the table.
Trouble to the tune of 16 power, trample, and hexproof.
Wow. Is this Brian Lynn just slamming the door shut here, Reed?
I'm trying to think what
Yeah.
Seth can have short, assuming he boarded out Wild Growth Walker. It's hard for me to think of even combinations of cards that he can have. Now, he has Vraska, so he can either make another 2/2 blocker, or he can kill the elf and give himself an extra mana in the form of the treasure. So you think, what can you do with 8 mana? What's the most toughness you can put on the board with 8 mana? No. If that's the way it's starting for Seth Manfield, I think he's done. I think we're going to see both Seth Manfield and Owen Turtenwald eliminated in the quarterfinals here.
Wow. Stars falling, potentially here in our quarters at Grand Prix Milwaukee. Branchwalker for Seth finds just a land. Here's a decision with Vraska taking down the Llanowar Elves, making a treasure and a Carnage Tyrant of his own.
So we have 9 toughness against 16 power. Not enough.
Seth Manfield is at 3 life. And here is the swing from Brian. And there is a handshake from Seth Manfield. Brian Lynn advancing to our semifinals with Golgari midrange. And that is Owen Turtenwald and Seth Manfield eliminated from our top 8 here at Milwaukee. So we've got our semifinalists all set here. Brian Lynn from Minneapolis, Jackson Hicks also from Minneapolis, represent. Isaac Croute from Toronto, and Adrian Sullivan, who lives in Madison. Let's take a look at our bracket. Semifinals will be Isaac Croute playing Adrian Sullivan. So that is going to be Croute on, and as you set this up, Reed, that's 2 Jeskai control mirror. That's Jeskai control mirror there. And Brian Lynn versus Jackson Hicks, and that's a Golgari mirror.
Yeah, so I would call Brian Lynn versus Jackson Hicks a true mirror. Their decks look very, very similar.
Okay.
No real functional differences other than a card choice here and there. But Isaac Croute versus Adrian Sullivan, this is a mirror match of different flavors of the same archetype. Adrian Sullivan, of course, being the renowned longtime deck builder that he is, brought a very, very unique take on Jeskai, featuring 4 treasure maps, 4 Niv Mizzets, all in the main deck.
I love it.
And you got to pick him for that reason. The mana advantage and the 4 copies of the uncounterable Haymaker card, it has to put him in an advantage, at least in game 1 of this mirror match.
Yeah, he brought a pretty special build of the Jeskai control list to this tournament, and it's been a treat to watch it all weekend. So it'll be cool to see what it does here in this mirror coming up in the semifinals. And really cool for Adrian, too, to get back on the Pro Tour. So congratulations to him for that. All right, our semifinals coming your way in just a second. Don't go anywhere.